You're standing at the TSA checkpoint, confident you've packed smart. Your carry-on passed through the scanner, and you're already thinking about your gate when the officer calls you back. They ask you to step aside. Your bag is flagged, and now you're watching other passengers move through while an agent unpacks your belongings on a steel table under fluorescent lights. The item they pull out seems harmless. You've flown with it before. But the enforcement changed, and you didn't know. What happens next isn't a lecture or a warning. It's choice. Surrender the item, repack and check your bag for a fee, or miss your flight entirely. The system that decides this isn't random, and the officers aren't guessing. They're following a regulatory framework that shifted dramatically in recent months. And if you walked into this airport assuming nothing had changed, you're already behind. Your hands are shaking slightly. You can feel your heart rate pick up. The officer's expression is neutral, but you're calculating in your head. How much time until boarding closes? 20 minutes? 15? This isn't bad luck. It's not even new rules in the traditional sense. Most of what's catching people has been policy for years. What changed is enforcement architecture. This year, in 2025, TSA upgraded to new CT scanners and has been gradually rolling them out in airports. The system flags anomalies automatically, and agents are now measured on catch rates. That means discretion is down, automation is up, and the margin for honest mistakes has essentially disappeared. Add to that, airlines are under pressure to speed up boarding times, which means they're incentivized to catch violations at the gate before you ever reach the checkpoint. Gate agents now have scanners, scales, and quotas. What used to slide through on a slow Tuesday morning now triggers a mandatory secondary check. The pattern is clear once you see it. Certain items, certain bag types, and certain packing choices are mathematically more likely to get flagged. It's not about being unlucky, it's about knowing what the system is looking for. The good news? Once you understand the logic, you can pack around it. The triggers are specific, the thresholds are measurable, and most passengers are still operating on outdated assumptions from 2019. What follows is the exact list of items and scenarios that are pulling travelers into secondary screening in 2025 and how to avoid every single one in the upcoming year. The first thing that trips people up is the item they rely on most without ever thinking about it. You arrive at security with your reliable 30,000 milliamp hour power bank that's traveled with you for years. The TSA officer examines it, pulls out a calculator, and informs you it exceeds the 100 watt-hour limit for carry-on batteries. Your device is confiscated on the spot. You're about to argue, you're rehearsing the words, but I've flown with this before. When you see the officer's face, there's no negotiation happening here. Your phone is at 37% battery. You've got a 6-hour flight and a 3-hour layover ahead of you. Now here's what actually changed. The 100 watt-hour limit isn't new. It's been FAA policy since 2013. What is new is mandatory enforcement at every checkpoint. After the January 20th, 2025 Air Busan cargo fire in South Korea that forced an emergency evacuation traced directly to lithium batteries and checked luggage, the TSA implemented mandatory battery verification protocols. Officers now multiply your power bank's milliamp hour rating by its voltage, typically 3.7 volts, then divide by 1,000 to determine watt hours. A 30,000 milliamp hour battery calculates to 111 watt hours, above the threshold. This stricter enforcement emerged as a direct response to documented cargo hold fires, making the calculation a mandatory checkpoint step that cannot be skipped or waived. Screeners now carry conversion charts and are specifically trained to flag batteries exceeding 100 watt-hours, with supervisor approval required for anything between 100 and 160 watt-hours. The power bank is immediately confiscated with no retrieval option. You'll miss having backup charging for your entire trip. If you argue or attempt to repack it as checked luggage, you risk missing your flight during the rebooking process. And here's the critical part. As of March 1st, 2025, spare lithium batteries are now completely prohibited in checked luggage. Not discouraged, banned. So you can't check it even if you wanted to. Before packing, check your power bank's label for watt-hour rating. It's usually printed near the capacity. Keep it under 100 watt-hours, or purchase a compliant 27,000 milliamp hour model, approximately 99.9 watt-hours, designed specifically for air travel. Now, this is where most travelers are convinced they followed the rules and still end up wrong. You've carefully transferred your skincare products into TSA-approved 3-ounce bottles and placed them in a clear quart bag. At the checkpoint, the officer removes your bag and tells you the combined volume exceeds limits. Multiple bottles get confiscated despite each being under the size threshold. You're staring at your expensive serums on that table, $80 worth of skincare. The officer isn't looking at you anymore. They're already moving to the next bag. You realize there's no appeal process here. They're gone. Here's the truth that nobody explains correctly. The 3-1-1 rule has always meant 3.4 ounces per container, 1 quart-sized bag, 1 bag per passenger. The rule never changed. What changed is technology catching violations. The new CT scanners rolled out across major airports in 2025 can analyze liquid density patterns with 3-dimensional imaging. When your quart bag is stuffed with 10 or 12 small bottles, even if each is compliant, the system flags it because the bag itself is overfilled and cannot seal flat. This stems from updated threat assessment models, showing multiple small containers can be consolidated post-security. X-ray operators now flag bags where the quart bag is bulging, overstuffed, or contains so many bottles that the liquid density approaching or exceeding 1 quart total becomes visually obvious through the scanner, triggering manual inspection. The policy closes a loophole where passengers carried 15 or 20 small bottles that collectively pose the same concern as larger quantities. Any bottles that prevent the quart bag from sealing flat are confiscated immediately. You'll need to choose which items to surrender at the checkpoint. The screening process creates a 15 to 20-minute delay while officers verify and document the violation in their system. But here's what's actually new and useful. As of July 2025, 11 categories of liquids are now exempt from the 3-1-1 rule: baby formula and food, breast milk, medications, contact lens solution, biological specimens for medical testing, wet cell batteries for medical devices, frozen liquids for medical use, liquid nutrition for passengers with disabilities, duty-free purchases within 48 hours with sealed bag and receipt, cremated remains in TSA-approved containers, and fresh eggs in original commercial packaging. Use a single clear quart-sized bag and do a pre-pack volume check. Your liquids should fill roughly 75% of the bag with room to seal it flat. Consolidate products where possible. Decant shampoo and conditioner into one bottle, or bring solid alternatives like bar soap and powder deodorant to avoid liquid limits entirely. The problem doesn't always appear at the checkpoint. Sometimes it waits until boarding begins. You roll your sleek smart luggage to the gate, proud of its built-in USB charging and GPS tracking. The gate agent stops you during boarding, inspects the bag's battery compartment, and declares it cannot be brought on board. You're forced to check it, but the airline refuses because the battery is permanently installed. This is where it gets expensive. Airlines now universally prohibit smart bags with non-removable lithium batteries in both carry-on and checked luggage due to fire suppression limitations. If a battery malfunction occurs in the cabin, crew can remove the battery and isolate it. In the cargo hold, there's no access to suppress a lithium fire, which can reach temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees and compromise aircraft systems. Gate agents physically verify battery removal capability before allowing boarding. They will ask you to remove the battery in front of them to prove it's removable. If you can't remove the battery, neither can they. This isn't TSA preference, it's an FAA mandate that became strictly enforced in late 2024 after multiple smart bag battery incidents forced emergency landings, including a high-profile Delta flight diversion in November 2024. Your bag is denied boarding entirely. Can you buy a new bag somewhere in this terminal? The gate agent is already helping the next passenger. You're invisible, and your clothes, your laptop, everything you need for this trip is locked inside a bag that's not allowed on this plane. You must abandon it at the airport, ship it separately at your expense, often costing $200 to $400, or miss your flight while finding alternative luggage. Travel insurance typically doesn't cover losses from prohibited items you attempted to bring because it's considered a known violation. Before purchasing any smart luggage, confirm the battery is completely removable without tools. You should be able to pull it out in seconds with just your hands. At the airport, remove the battery before checking the back and carry the battery separately in your personal item where you can monitor it during flight, making sure the terminals are covered with tape or in a protective case. Some items aren't dangerous at all. They're just impossible to verify through a scanner. You arrive at security with your professional DSLR camera in a padded bag. The TSA officer asks you to remove it from the case, inspects the body with the telephoto lens attached, and directs you to a separate screening area. Your camera is swabbed, partially disassembled, and you're questioned about its components for 15 minutes while your boarding time ticks closer. Large camera bodies, especially with attached lenses, battery grips, or vertical grips, create dense X-ray shadows that obscure their internal structure. Security officers cannot distinguish between legitimate circuitry and concealed prohibited materials when the device appears as a solid mass on the scanner. Professional cameras with detachable components raise additional concern because hollow lens barrels and grip cavities could hide contraband. The flag isn't about photography equipment being dangerous. It's about the physical impossibility of verifying what's inside a 3-pound metal housing without direct inspection. This becomes especially problematic with the new CT scanners, which are more sensitive to density variations. Officers are trained to manually examine any electronic device where internal density prevents clear imaging. You face secondary screening lasting 20 to 40 minutes while officers swab for explosives residue and inspect every detachable component. If you cannot power on the camera or explain its professional features, it may be held for additional investigation, potentially causing you to miss your flight. The delay compounds if you're traveling during peak hours when secondary screening areas are backed up. At security, you're doing mental math. How long can they hold the plane? When do they close the door? You have thousands of dollars of equipment spread across this table, and you're about to miss your flight because your camera looks suspicious on a scanner. To avoid this stress, before reaching security, detach all lenses, battery grips, and accessories. Place each component separately in bins so officers can see inside hollow spaces. Ensure your camera battery is charged enough to power on and take a test photo when requested. Carry a simple one-page equipment list describing each item with model numbers and approximate values, which helps expedite the verification process and demonstrates you're a legitimate professional photographer rather than someone who might be concealing items. You pack homemade baked goods wrapped in foil for your family visit. At security, the X-ray operator stops the belt, calls over a supervisor, and pulls your bag for inspection. The wrapped package gets unwrapped, poked, prodded, and swabbed. Your carefully packed cookies are now crushed, and you've been delayed 15 minutes while missing passengers push past you. The officer is handling your grandmother's recipe with latex gloves like it's evidence. You want to explain it's just cookies, but you're learning in real time that just cookies and potential threat look identical to a machine that only sees density. X-ray machines detect materials by density and atomic composition, not appearance. Dense, irregularly shaped food items, especially those wrapped in foil or packed tightly, create ambiguous images that resemble clay-like substances, organic materials used in improvised devices, or concealed contraband. Homemade items lack commercial packaging with identifiable branding, barcodes, and ingredient labels, making visual verification impossible through the scanner alone. Officers are trained that anything registering as organic material with unusual density patterns requires physical inspection because threats and food can have identical X-ray signatures. The machine cannot smell or taste. It only sees mass and density, and your lasagna looks identical to materials officers must investigate. This is especially true with the new 3-dimensional CT scanners, which provide more detailed density mapping, which means they catch things that old 2-dimensional scanners missed.
Your food is unwrapped and physically inspected, often rendering it unpresentable or contaminated from handling with gloved hands. The screening process delays you by 10 to 20 minutes. If officers cannot confidently identify the contents, the food may be confiscated entirely, with no option for repackaging or return to you. Some airports now require tasting food in front of officers if there's any doubt about contents. Transport food in clear, transparent containers whenever possible, so officers can visually verify contents without opening them. Leave items in original commercial packaging with visible labels and ingredient lists. If bringing homemade food, pack it loosely in clear plastic wrap rather than foil, and consider placing a note card identifying the item, chocolate chip cookies or brownies, inside the container so X-ray operators can see both the food and the label. Look, if this feels like a lot, that's completely normal. TSA doesn't exactly advertise these changes, and most travelers won't find out until they're already at the checkpoint with a line of annoyed people behind them sighing and checking their watches. Here's the truth, you're not behind. You're actually ahead of 90% of people flying this year. The difference between a smooth airport experience and a stressful one isn't luck, it's just knowing what to expect before you get there. And that's exactly what you're doing right now. None of these rules are designed to trip you up on purpose. They're just procedures that evolved in response to real incidents, and once you know them, they become automatic. You'll be the person breezing through security while others are frantically repacking their bags, arguing with officers, or realizing they need to sprint back to check-in. So take a breath. You've got the hard part covered. You understand the system. Now let's talk about the one item that causes more confiscations than anything else, and how to pack it correctly so you never face that moment of dread. This is the line where inconvenience turns into confiscation, and there is absolutely no discretion left. You're placing your bag on the TSA conveyor belt. Inside, spare phone batteries, a portable charger, or loose 18650 cells rattling around with your keys and coins. The X-ray operator sees dark, dense rectangles with exposed terminals. Your bag gets pulled for secondary screening immediately. Here's what everyone needs to understand. Lithium batteries with exposed terminals can short-circuit on contact with metal objects, keys, coins, foil, other batteries, and even the metal zippers inside your bag. A short creates rapid heating, potentially reaching ignition temperature within seconds. TSA officers are trained to identify loose batteries because thermal runaway events in aircraft cabins have caused emergency landings and forced evacuations. The March 1, 2025 rule change made this even critical. Spare lithium batteries are now completely banned from checked luggage. They must be in carry-on only. The system flags any battery not in original packaging or without terminal protection, because the risk isn't theoretical. It's an engineering fact documented in multiple aviation incidents. TSA will confiscate non-compliant batteries immediately. No exceptions, no retrieval after screening, no "I'll fix it right now." If batteries show damage like swelling, dents, or exposed cells, you may face additional screening, mandatory baggage inspection, and potential involvement of airline safety officers who will document the violation. Repeated violations or attempting to bypass screening with damaged lithium batteries can result in civil penalties starting at $500 and referral to law enforcement for federal safety violations under 49 CFR 175.10. In severe cases involving deliberate concealment or damaged batteries, penalties can reach thousands of dollars. And here's what really gets people. You can't claim ignorance. "I didn't know" isn't a defense under FAA regulations. You signed something when you bought your ticket acknowledging you understood the rules. The officer pulling your bag isn't going to give you a warning pamphlet. They're going to cite you, document it, and you'll be explaining to your credit card company why there's a $500 federal fine from the TSA. Keep spare batteries in original manufacturing packaging with the plastic casing intact. If that's unavailable, cover each battery's terminals with electrical tape. Both ends need to be covered. Or place each battery in a separate plastic bag or battery case designed for this purpose. Store portable chargers with built-in batteries separate from metal objects in a dedicated pocket of your bag. Inspect all batteries before packing. Any damage, swelling, leaking, corrosion, or damage means the battery stays home, period. One damaged battery can ground your entire flight if discovered. By this point, a pattern should be forming, and it's not random. But wait, there's one more thing that caught everyone by surprise in 2025. May 7th, 2025 marked the official Real ID enforcement deadline. Standard driver's licenses issued before your state's compliance date no longer work for domestic flights. You need a Real ID compliant driver's license with a star in the upper right corner, a valid passport, a passport card, a military ID, or other acceptable federal identification. If you show up with a non-compliant license, you'll face enhanced screening, where TSA asks additional identity verification questions and may require secondary documents. In some cases, you can be denied boarding entirely. This isn't a soft rollout anymore. It's federal law. Apply for your Real ID at least 8 to 12 weeks before travel, because some states have months-long backlogs at DMV offices. And here's something interesting. As of July 2025, the shoe removal requirement has ended at airports equipped with advanced CT scanners. But this only applies to airports with the new technology, and not all checkpoints, even within the same airport, may have it. Orlando, Phoenix, and a few other major hubs allow shoes on. Most airports still require removal. Don't assume, watch what the people ahead of you are doing. Here's what matters most. You're not scrambling anymore. You're not the person nervously emptying their bag at the checkpoint while everyone behind them is sighing and checking their watches. You're the traveler who moves through security like you've done this 1,000 times, because now you basically have. The 2026 rules aren't designed to catch you off guard. They're predictable. They're logical. They're based on documented incidents that forced regulatory changes. And now that you know them, you control the experience instead of reacting to it. Think about your next trip. You'll pack with intention. You'll approach the TSA checkpoint with confidence, while other passengers are frantically Googling restrictions at the gate
Or begging officers to make exceptions. You'll already be at your terminal, headphones in, boarding pass ready, maybe even enjoying a coffee. That's not luck. That's preparation. The travelers who stress about security are the ones who ignore the changes until it's too late, or assume things work the way they did 5 years ago. But you made a different choice. You invested 20 minutes to understand the system, and that decision just saved you from delays, confiscations, hundreds of dollars in checked bag fees, and that stomach-drop moment of, did I pack something wrong? While standing in front of a TSA officer with a line of impatient travelers behind you. So when you walk up to that checkpoint in 2026, you're not hoping you got it right. You know you did. Your liquids are compliant and in a properly sealed quart bag. Your electronics are positioned correctly for inspection. Your batteries are in carry-on with protected terminals. Your bag is organized so officers can see exactly what they need to see. You're calm because you're in control. That's the real upgrade here, not just knowing the rules, but becoming the kind of traveler who doesn't need to worry about them. You're already there. If you found this helpful, I'd appreciate you subscribing. It helps me know what's resonating and what to explore next. And if you've got thoughts, questions, or a different perspective, the comments are open. I read them all, and often they spark ideas for future videos. Either way, thanks for watching, and safe travels.